Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. We are going to talk in the next 20 minutes or so, over the next 20 minutes or so, about building sustainable brands. And we've learned a lot in the recent past at Lando about how to do that. So if I could request Lauren to please bring up my presentation. Thank you. Um, right, let's get underway. So today we're going to talk about 10 things really, 6 success factors for building sustainable brands and 4 steps on how to build them. Before we get into the topic itself, let's look at some key data points and facts because there is a tremendous amount of data that we look at as well. So, over 80% of people say they will always pick a brand with a better sustainability record, and they believe companies should be helping to improve the environment. Among younger people, Gen Zers, over 70% are concerned about humanity's impact on the world, and they would also spend more money on a service that was sustainably produced. So, sustainability is one of their biggest choice drivers. And yet, on the other hand, we find that a minority of the world's 250 largest companies, only 4 in 10, discuss the UN's SDGs in their corporate reporting. So clearly, things are out of sync. Um, why is sustainable branding and design a commercial advantage? Well, companies are actively managing and planning for climate change get an 18% higher ROI than companies that don't. Our colleagues at Kantar say that brands that have a high sense of purpose experience a 1.75 times more brand valuation rise over the past 12 years compared to the median rate of 86% or so, so more than twice as much. Unilever's sustainable living brands, which are a big chunk of their portfolio now, grew 70% faster than the rest of the business and delivered 75% of their growth in 2018. And the potential upside to tackling these sustainability challenges is quite significant. But on the other hand, sustainable business model innovation could open up economic opportunities worth $12 trillion and create 300 million jobs. So we've identified 6 key success factors in sustainability branding. What gets in the way very often is the negativity of the ongoing language in sustainability. And as human beings, we're primed to avoid it. So it might shock, but it doesn't inspire positive action. What we believe that instead, what you must do is make it positive. If a brand is to be successful in creating a movement and inspiring action, it needs to have a positive message because positive messages drive action and they drive emotional connection. So in the near past, we've worked with Coty to create We Do, the first sustainable at heart beauty brand that connects with Gen Zers, a brand that moves beauty from me to we. It's good for you, but it's good for the planet as well. The second thing that gets in the way is sameness. And there is a sea of sameness in the sustainability space. You'll see a lot of green, a lot of cardboardy brown, often, childlike typography, and the efforts that we see generally tend to fail to address the social and economic aspects of sustainability. They focus largely on the environment. We think you must be different. If a brand has to win, it has to look at how to do things differently and in a way that is relevant and compelling. Brands that are winning, like Tesla, are sustainable, but they're also deeply desirable at the same time. Tesla's sustainable at the heart, but the products it produces are state of the art works of art. The other thing that gets in the way is that the whole topic is massive. It's just too big to understand. It's very immense. The consequences are devastating, and people go, I can't do very much about it. So, what do we make of all this? Well, we say simplify language because single use was named Word of the Year in 2018. And if a brand is to win, it has to ensure its messages are clear and simple. Just the way the use of single use galvanized action from governments and people alike to start tackling the plastic challenge. Another mistake that many make is to treat it merely as a CSR exercise. Sustainability is a bit risky. If the organization is not aligned behind the initiative and empowered to act, it can be quite damaging. So Burberry was rated once the most sustainable luxury brand, but they lost all credibility when they burned nearly $40 million worth of unsold goods. Instead, if you take authentic action, that works. So in the first year, Fearless Girl from State Street Global Advisors helped reshape corporate boardrooms. So if a brand wants to pursue sustainability, then it has to commit to it and act. State Street pulled off one of the most incredible, audacious marketing stunts ever, but they backed it up with action, targeting 150 companies who all added at least one female board member in the first year of action. And by March of last year, that number stood at 445 companies which had acted. What gets in the way also is that audiences find it really difficult because doing good is difficult and people don't change their behaviors easily. So many well meaning initiatives fall flat because we're just lazy and we won't change unless that change is made simple. So we say, make it easy. For a brand to create a movement, it really needs to make it easy for audiences to participate. Ariel did it very simply. They changed their formulation to clean at 30 degrees rather than 40 to 60 of its previous forms of the product. And all people had to do was change the setting on their machine. This is simple, it's easy, and it's impactful. The last thing that gets in the way is not being grounded in the brand. If you pursue a sustainability agenda which isn't clearly aligned to the existing brand proposition and positioning, that'll be dissonant. Building credibility is therefore going to be challenging. So, Donald Trump advocating for LGBTQ rights is at odds with his stance and his actions relating to this audience. It's really hard to believe. Instead, we say align to brand. To be recognized as a leading sustainable brand means aligning to the brand truth. Barclays have always championed access and equality, so their sixth year of sponsorship for London Pride resonates, and they also champion LGBTQ rights internally across their entire organization. So the six key factors in sustainability branding as we see them: make it positive, be different, simplify the language, take authentic action, make it easy, and align to brand. So with these six success factors in mind, how do you actually go about it? What steps does a company need to take to build sustainability into their brand? The first, quite obviously, is to define the approach. And you must define the level of ambition first, says Hannah Harrison, who's WPP's sustainability director. So, building sustainability into the brand is powerful, but it carries reputational risk. The organization and the leadership must support the initiative and be comfortable with the risks. Brands that have made sustainability central to their image when the organization isn't fully committed can suffer significant reputational damage, like Burberry. So the implication is if the organization is fully committed and prepared, this would indicate that sustainability should be added as a core pillar to the brand. Now, how far are you willing to go? Well, there's a continuum and there's a bit of a journey here. So we've got a map that will assist brands in defining where they are playing or want to play in the future. So this is a very simple 2 by 2. On the horizontal axis, we've got sustainability either peripheral or central to a brand. And on the vertical axis, sustainability peripheral or central to business strategy. In the lower left-hand corner, you'll see that organizations which are not in any way pursuing a sustainable agenda or those that are taking first steps would place here. They might have certain initiatives or pledges, but they don't make this central to their business strategy or brands. On the right of that, in the lower right corner, you'll see sustainability as an initiative. Here, organizations that place here have various initiatives that may contribute to a sustainable agenda, but they're not knitted into a broader organizational set of operations. And the initiatives are often branded to build brand association with the cause. Now, if you go above into the two quadrants where sustainability is more central to business strategy, on the left, if sustainability is a business imperative but yet peripheral to the brand, Organizations in this quadrant see the commercial and moral imperative of sustainability, but choose not to strongly communicate or tie their activities to the brands. And on the right, which is sort of at the peak of all of this, is sustainability at the core. Organizations that place here commit fully to sustainability as being central to their operations, as well as making it part of their brand. So we mapped a few brands here, and you can see how various brands, most of which you probably know very well, map out in terms of how we see and rate their efforts in terms of sustainability being either central or not to the brand and to the business. We'll talk a bit more about some of these as we move on. The second thing you must do is commit and prepare. You must have your house in order before you launch anything. So if you've agreed the approach, then the business must commit fully and ensure it's supported at all levels across all areas of the operation. That means you must have your rationale and your reactive statements prepared well in advance, check your facts, verify your figures, and ensure readiness across the business before any such initiative is launched. Because once it's out there in the public, any member of the public can ask any member of the organization what your effort actually means. So, the importance of sustainability as a driver downstream, you must measure it for tracking purposes. But be prepared because you have to be able to answer the key question here. If you put this out in the market, what would Greta say about it? The third step is to find your focus because too much breadth is a problem. So some companies have rather impressive sets of initiatives which make for comprehensive sustainability programs. But when it comes to brands, breadth is a challenge and focus is a gift. So it's essential to identify a singular point of view or issue that the brand will stand behind. If you've got too many initiatives, then the impact is diluted and it might lead to confusion for your audiences. So, the implications here: identify the focus area that is globally relevant with an ability to localize, ensure that this is aligned to the brand's purpose, and then you must support it strongly, both financially and through communications. In other words, what do you really want to be famous for and what do you want to own? So we've got a case study here from one of our sister companies on Tommy Hilfiger about how a brand of the 80s can redefine the American dream. Now, when you think of Tommy Hilfiger, these are the sorts of images from their advertising that probably come to mind. If you look on the left, that's Tommy Hilfiger's America as has been picturized over the years. It's a lot of the Hamptons, it's a lot of sort of Nantucket imagery. And on the right, you see the inclusive America that exists now, or at least used to exist in the very near past. And it's got, certain attributes that are quite key to it. And our challenge was to figure out which of these attributes Tommy Hilfiger could credibly own. And there are three here that are quite strong: hope, strength, and resilience. So we created a new purpose called Anything is Possible for Everyone, with inclusivity at the heart of it. And we found a hidden jewel, which was Tommy Adaptive, which was a line of clothes for differently able people. And here's a fantastic innovation, which is magnetic buttons. So buttons that sort of attach themselves, as it were. And this adaptive range has been nominated in the Design Museum's London Beazley Designs of the Year exhibition, which is kind of like the Oscars of the design world. Uh, then how do you execute from here? That's our fourth step. Can we identify the perfect moment to launch? So you can have a number of approaches available to execute, but some key points may assist in launching and rolling out. For example, is there an already established event that can be leveraged? Are there conferences, anniversaries, and so on? Or is there a key tension? How can we get people to work with the system, with the machine, rather than against it? So there may be an opportunity to create two messages for B2B and B2C audiences. For example, retail targets microfinance and social justice, and business banking targets an environmental cause, if you're a bank, as an example. So how do we then bring all of this to life? Through brand. We've got a lovely case study here from the International Volleyball Federation, whom we work with from our Paris office. And they're a federation with limited means, but they wanted to act for good in a way that is visible and ownable. So that's our brand experience wheel, where we start at the heart of the brand with the strategy and the positioning and take it forward into expression across all kinds. And here's a new brand that was created called GoodNet.
Every year, 640,000 tons of fishing nets are discarded or lost in the ocean, making up 10% of all oceanic litter. These ghost nets drift for years, needlessly catching and killing millions of marine species. That's why we launched GoodNet, a sustainable initiative by the International Volleyball Federation to remove ghost nets from the sea and transform them into beach volleyball nets. So these recycled nets can be placed on beaches around the world for local community use. To raise awareness of ghost nets and make the problem truly visible, we embroidered them with images of endangered sea creatures. We placed our first good nets in Copacabana, the birthplace of beach volleyball, revealing the challenge facing our oceans, educating future generations, and playing volleyball, of course. All with the support of Olympic and world sporting champions.
See the idea of bringing together our sport that also has a net and also happens on the beach so close to the sea. It's huge.
The sports volleyball is around one net. Our lives is one net, but good net, not ghost nets.
Just 1 month after good nets hit the beach, we are already making an impact.
You know, all that trash that washes up on beaches around the world, it's finally going to be put to some good.
And our best result? The United Nations adopted GoodNet Project for its Clean Seas campaign.
What GoodNet is about is really about turning ghost nets into beach volleyball nets. Ghost nets are nets that are discarded into the seas by fishermen once they've outlived their usefulness. Either they've become torn, or they're old, or they're just too flexible to catch fish. So very often in sort of bad ecological practice, these end up at the bottom of the ocean. And there are, millions of feet and meters of ghost nets that are cluttering the bottoms of the Earth's oceans. And this initiative is really about getting those ghost nets out and turning them into beach volleyball nets. So for volleyball players, as Giba, a Brazilian volleyball star and ambassador of the GoodNet project, says, nets are at the center of the game and their joy, and they love the beach. So for them, it was really hard to learn that in the oceans, there are so many nets that are doing so much harm out of sight. And, once the program took off and a tremendous amount of discarded nets, ghost nets, were picked up and turned into volleyball nets, and then installed on beach volleyball poles through the GoodNet program. Just a month after the initiative hit the beach, we started making a huge impact with about $58 million worth of estimated media coverage in key global media like BBC, Sky Sports, Eurosports, the New York Times, and so on. And now it's gone even bigger than that. GoodNet has the support of the International Olympic Committee. It's joined the UN's Environmental Clean Seas campaign. And it really sort of, exemplifies the amount of collaboration that is needed just on the back of a brilliant idea to be able to do a significant amount of good in the most sustainable way. So just to summarize then, our 6 key success factors, which we've talked about: make it positive, be different, simplify language, take authentic action, make it easy, align to the brand. And then the steps that you take to build a sustainable brand: define the approach first, then commit and prepare, find your focus, and then execute relentlessly. So with that, we're done, and happy to take your questions at this point.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ash. That really was a great, really insightful presentation. I'm sure we're going to get some Some questions coming through now that we've stopped. We've had one question making reference to the recording, to the film that we wanted to show. I'm sure that we can make that available from the Middle East Brand Summit website later. So we'll see if we can fit that in together with that presentation, and in fact, hopefully, all of the presentations that we've seen today. So before we come on to everyone else's questions, I've got a question that I'd like to ask here, Ash, which sort of going back to that beginning, you talked a little bit about the Gen Zers and millennials and so on. Obviously, we know how important sustainability is to that sector. Obviously, we're now going to have the new demographic, the Coronials, and I'm just wondering if you can see. Do you think that with all of the issues and the problems that we're going to be seeing over the course of the next 10 years, is sustainability still going to be top of the agenda for the next demographic? Do we think?
I'm hypothesizing, Andrew. That's a great question, but my gut says more so than ever. Principally because I think there is a general realization that life between, the balance of life between humanity and the rest of the ecosystem of the earth is a bit out of kilter. And therefore, the ways in which we act and the ways in which we consume have to be more holistic, more sustainable. And I think younger people are far more aware and conscious of this. And therefore, I think sustainability will continue to rise in primacy as a driving factor for business. And the proof of that is really in the success of companies that have seen this quite early, although it's never early enough, I dare add. But again, if you look at the numbers from Unilever, particularly the whole policy around building the future of the company, really betting the farm, as it were, on sustainability as a plank for the business, sustainability as a determinant of which brands to keep and which to discontinue, and the financial performance of those brands that are part of the Sustainable Brands Group. I think the numbers speak for themselves. So I, for one, would like to see more companies taking a more sustainable approach to doing business moving forward.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. We've had one question. It's often when we look at the issue of sustainability, we tend to look at those consumer-facing brands, and it is quite tempting to look at the case studies that focus on brands targeted to 25-year-olds, taking recycling this and so on and so forth. What about the B2B brands out there, though? How important do you feel sustainability is to those B2B brands?
Well, I think, we live in a strange time because automotive companies are now making PPE because that's what the times demand. And, that's a B2B product. So just as a topical aside. But I think it is important simply because, buying for business and buying for personal consumption aren't dramatically different. So a business that is a conscious buyer, conscious about sustainability, will most likely choose product, even if it is B2B product or services that have sustainability built in. You see that today more visibly in terms of some of the human practices that for example, the relationships between investor for people companies in the UK and so on, or companies that have a higher number of women on boards and women in senior positions. And I think increasingly we are, from a business to business perspective, favoring the right sorts of things. And I think sustainability falls into that bracket of being the right sort of thing.
Okay, fantastic. Well, there have been a few other questions, Ash, but we're going to have to leave it there. Sadly, we've run out of time. But the questions, I think you can see the questions, and I think they'll be in the attendee chat. So if you want to hang around bit later, maybe answer some of those questions for our delegates. In the meantime, a really big thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm going to leave the floor for Maria Grazia and Hassan to kick off and talk a little bit about their thoughts from this morning's breakfast. Actually, I'm staying here thinking about it because I'm supposed to be asking you questions on that. So I'm not going to disappear. It's not like we've got slides. I'm actually staying for this session. So before we move on to Thomas, let's talk about this morning. It was an interesting morning, and I'd just like to hear just sort of top level, Hassan. When we started the breakfast, I thought we could be filled with doom and gloom. I thought it could have gone and been an incredibly depressing breakfast session. I was very surprised at how positive is the wrong word, but upbeat, certainly, those who were attending were there. And I just, would like to hear your thoughts. We'll start off with you on that.
Great. First of all, it was an amazing day, and that's a wrap almost with the session that we're having. You've put a fantastic online seminar and proves that despite everything that's happening, the world goes on when it is filled with people that are really determined and passionate about what they're doing. Obviously, Andrew, you and the Craven Hill Publishing team are lead the pack on this one. This morning's session, I thought it was super interesting, and you know very well that I was an advocate of it, because I believe that in times like this, there isn't anything called competition. There is actually collaboration. And we spoke about it even in the morning session that I did my presentation as a trend that we should be looking at and seeing. So I believe that despite that we all come from agencies and consultancies that do compete on a day-to-day level, but I believe that there is more brains were put on the table to be able to flag issues that are specifically related to the branding world. Great lineup of attendees, great insights. And one of the things, the questions that were asked today were from a let's call it from a research or data mining perspective, were there to be able to narrow the gap between the survey that we're also jointly doing to see what customers think versus what the industry is looking at, and see how we can narrow that gap with no doubt. So generally, I think it was extremely positive, insightful, and we should be pushing for more of those.
Thank you, Hassan. Maria Grazia, just before we look at some of the specific areas, what did you feel from this morning? As I say, upbeat, perhaps not as negative, certainly, as I felt it could have been. Would you like to share any of your thoughts from this morning?
Yes, sure. I think what was clear is that, we are still, as Alex Brunori was saying this morning, we are still just after the denial stage. We are now all getting to grips with the reality that is facing our business. I think everybody was really aware of the difficult time that it was ahead of us over the next 2 quarters, but everybody was as determined to put together plans and measures in place to make sure that we get through this in the best shape possible. The other point was the idea of collaboration, because I think the other important point that came up this morning was, especially in the Middle East, we don't have a design or branding body that is actually a forum for this kind of discussion. And the idea was, thinking about potentially creating one, right? So having a place where all the branding and brand strategy conversation can have a place and a house, which I think is interesting.
Yes, I certainly think that came across. It is interesting that, unlike other places in the world, there is no industry body as such, and I don't think that is a magazine's role or responsibility to be a trade body. But certainly, I was delighted to be able to at least have brought everyone together this morning. One of the things that we looked at was focusing on, and we've just heard it to some degree in terms of sustainability, but one of the areas that we did look at to some degree was this sense of purpose. And the way that organizations, and I think I want to take it wider than brand agencies and strategy agencies from this morning. One of the things was this need for a behavioral shift between employees and management, and of course between customers and suppliers, and the way that the new normal is going to lead to a real change, perhaps, in the way that we are relating with, as I say, with staff, with managers, management with staff, organizations with their clients, with their suppliers, and so on and so forth. And there was a lot of talk. You mentioned it just then, sort of internally amongst yourselves about collaboration, but that aspect of collaboration seems to need to be far wider. And I don't know if Hassan or Maria Grazia, if you have any thoughts that you'd like to add from that. Maria Grazia.
Yeah, there were a few interesting points this morning. There is one about building our own Zoom charisma as a requirement for our, business future. We've all been exposed to managing our teams remotely, and this is becoming really something that all of us will have to do, even when we go back to our, office life. And the other point is about office life and the role of offices in the future, because what we've experienced is that we can deliver business remotely. There are a few challenges there, but it doesn't completely disrupt our business. So the point is, when we will be able to go back to the office and work together in a physical environment, what will be the role that the office and the business environment will have to play for a thriving, even more exciting business collaboration or employee manager collaboration. I think these were two interesting highlights from the conversation this morning. Hassan.
Yes, thanks, Maria Grazia. Yes, I believe on the internal front, one of the things that we discussed as well was today it's not a normal situation or scenario to really evaluate, which means people are confined. Hence, we see different mood swings and different productivity and efficiency levels. So we can't really measure as we speak that this could become the new normal in the future when things open up. So it is an area, and of course, nobody knows the answer yet to that because we haven't experienced full working remotely in times when life goes back, at least not back to normal, but back to play. So it's an area worth looking at. But this is again an area we spoke up. I mean, and also Ashish mentioned that we were talking about purpose. We spoke about culture, and even in my morning session, I spoke about that area. And I think this is where, when we find that there is a clear culture embedded within the organization and the leadership of this organization, we'll see how people will come around that. There will be ways to explore. There might be areas where there is more working remotely and even with more globalization, although there are a lot that fight that the economy of globalization is no longer here to stay. I tend to differ a bit on this one because I believe working remotely has taught us that there are endless opportunities, even from the internal perspective. On the external level, I think technology will play a big role. And I think that's the takeout as well of our early morning. You're calling it breakfast. I don't recall having breakfast, Andrew, but it's okay. So clients expect that with certain technologies that are available, and I think more disruptions in those innovations, we will be able to see how services and deliverables could be extended in that new normal. A lot of travel will be cut. More workshops will be conducted online. More tools will be invented and used. And this is where I truly believe within our industry that we would see a faster adoption of those, which we've already done, portion of it, but more to come, and less disruption of our business model.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Let's take that from this. I mean, we're talking here now to a large degree of the impact on agency life and agency world. I'm going to widen that out even further and talk about it from the client side, from in-house, from, there's always that terminology, in-house agency, client side, and so on. But let's have a look at it from there. And Thomas, I'm going to ask you now for really your thoughts on what companies should be thinking of now going forward. Should we be waiting till this is all finished before we start addressing our strategy? Should we be looking at it now? What are our thoughts and our sentiments from a strategic perspective?
Hi, thank you for having me. It's a great question. I think I think everyone is waiting till they have some line of sight to what the future looks like. I think we're getting there. It feels as though at least I'm sort of U.S. centric. Being in the U.S., that's my bias now. So I'm seeing it here that we're beginning to get a sense of where things could go. And I think once that begins to happen, I do think businesses will begin to start taking a long-term view. But as we all know, we've been living through a period of time where every week brought a new surprise, a new shock. So I think that's been a bit destabilizing for everyone. But I think we're quickly coming out of that. My sense is that we're now getting a good feel or a better feel for how things will be over the next 90 days, 120 days, and can start thinking for the future.
Are you in the situation where you're already getting clients kind of coming down and addressing you and asking you for that kind of input now? Brands can't stand still. Organizations can't stand still. Presumably, they're now already beginning to make some kind of strategic planning in place.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're seeing that. We are working with folks. There's two fronts. I mean, there's two different games we're playing. There's a short game and a long game, right? And the short game is, what does the next 90 days look like? 120 days? How does that affect what we're doing in the short term? But of course, there's often, or there's a number of folks that are looking at it from a more long-term view of, how does this fundamentally rewrite the market that we're operating in? How does this change customer sentiments? I mean, if I'm being brutally honest, there's going to be a lot of shakeout among competitors. Businesses will fail. Businesses will have to shift their offer. And some of the more forward-thinking brands we work with are thinking long-term like that as best they can today.
Yeah. Yes, Mario Grazia.
Sorry, if we go back to also the presentation that Alex gave this morning about the three different sectors or the differences among companies that are delivering services that are relevant during the crisis, companies going to be sectors that are going to be heavily disrupted and really have to hold because there's nothing they can do today. And the companies who can still operate, you can start, identifying which are the companies that could play a role today, which are the companies that have to start planning for the longer term because they have no alternative, and which are the ones that will have to look at both at the same time somehow. So it is really, like Hassan was saying this morning as well during this presentation, it is a case by case. I don't think there's any generic approach that you can, put on a blanket, apart from trying to imagine what the future is going to look like, but it's going to be really, really hard. So it depends on the sector and depends on the status of the brand, I would say.
Okay. Thank you. Hassan, in terms of your view, are you beginning to have these conversations with companies already with regards to this, or is there very much a kind of rabbit in a headlight philosophy going on?
Actually, we wanted to start mapping what the new brand experience would look like post-COVID-19, which is what the whole topic of today is. And we took a pause and we said, first of all, we have to source the right questions and ask them to the right people, because it is not only us to ask that. It's not about speculation. So we wanted to understand each and every industry, category, region, and market how they're thinking and what are the issues that they're facing, and hence that survey that you've been as well pushing through. Through that, we are looking to at a large scale data mining research to be able to extract those insights and build the new roadmap that we see. So there is no one size fits all. It is going to be looked at from a market perspective, from an industry perspective, and from a size as well perspective. Now we are at a level where not us, but generally businesses and clients, they're at the level of, like us, trying to contain, understand what's happening, contain, manage. Financials comes first. Then the obvious is how to move forward. We spoke about areas of innovation. We spoke about communicating and activating your purpose. We spoke about communication of your image, not just the shallow aesthetics aspect of it. All of those things are clients are looking at, and I believe that if we study the angle from the dimensions of differentiation, add to the business perspective component, we will have a better understanding of what the future holds for brands and businesses in general.
Yeah, I think that interestingly, whenever we've seen crises in the past, organizations have responded in a way that has met that crisis that has been unique to them. So, for example, after the 2008 financial services crisis, financial crash, a lot of organizations, not just in the banking sector, obviously, but actually a lot, almost all in the banking sector, went back and looked, how can we position trust as being one of the most important things? Let's make us not just trust, but embracing and personable, and putting the personality back into that side to make them meet the challenges that the banking crisis had met head on. And I think that the brand strategy, the advice that you guys are able to offer is able to help organizations, and always has done after all of the crisis that has happened in the past. But I think one of the problems here is that this is something that almost is so widespread. It's going to be something that is going to hit across all sectors. The financial services sector was kind of the banking sector after that. But this we now have across all sectors. Is it going to be a far greater challenge for you guys to heal the hurts with the transformative power of the services that you provide? Thomas, how about you tackling that question?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, this entire experience has reminded me of an essential truth, which I know, having worked in branding for 20 years, but it was good to be reminded, which is that brands, in the end of the day, are about relationships. They're about building relationships between a business and a consumer, a business and an employee, their communities. It's relationships, and relationships, as we all know from our own relationships growing up and we have now, go through trials and they go through tests, and they, when we can evaluate the quality of those relationships based on the moments that test them. In happy days, it's easy to be in love and everything, right? But there's times when there's tests that we all go through and challenges. And that's the real measure of the quality of the relationship. I think we could extract the same view about brands, and the brands that now are able to preserve that relationship, adapt appropriately to the conditions of the time, and find the truth of who they are with their consumers and employees and communities, will be the ones that prevail. And that will be unique. That's a unique fingerprint to each of those brands. But I think that essential, in some ways, in these times of complexity, the essential truths are most valuable. At the end of the day, a brand is about building a relationship. And those that can preserve that and adapt that and respond to the conditions will be the ones that thrive. And those that don't will be the ones that, are less successful.
I totally agree, Tori, with Thomas. And I would add to that is that even if I want to use the analogy of relationships, because it is, very synonymous with it, people do come out stronger from bad relationships or a hit in a relation. And I think one of the things is that this what we're noticing now is a fast track to a disruption that we were going to see anyways, be it with COVID or something else, or with nothing. Either technology changes or consumer mindsets. The change was coming, but I think it's just put on the fast burner now that we have to heal those relations faster, and that's through the right strategy and image in place as well.
I would just like to add the fact that I think the difference between the crisis that you mentioned, Andrew, and the crisis we are experiencing today is that at that time there was a responsibility on the financial sector side. So they had to heal the relationship with their consumer base because there was a responsibility there. What we are seeing today is that the challenges we are facing do not sit with any entity in terms of responsibility, any entity in particular. So it is a bit more about soul searching and finding a real purpose and becoming even more authentic and more true to the essence of the company than actually overcoming a challenge in the market. So what I think is going to happen is that the companies that will do that exercise and will define their purpose in the best way are going to overcome the challenge quickly and more effectively.
Thank you. That's a good point. We've had a couple of questions actually, and I'm going to kind of run through these because I think they're quite strong questions. So first, it's a question. It's made up of multiple parts, which is it possible to sum up what this crisis has taught us? What can we now do better? Which of the things we used to do that now don't make much sense any longer? And can this experience with remote work provide a better work-life balance for us? Or is it all about returning to business as usual once it's finished? So there's kind of a number of different components to that question. But I think they're kind of connected. And I think it is quite an interesting point, and I think it will change or possibly not. Let's find out. Who would like to pick up that question first?
I mean, I can start. You were talking about how do you see your screen? I'm seeing myself on the first left, so I took the initiative. I think it's a complex and deep and not. I wouldn't say it's a simple response to it. There's a lot of learnings out of everything. In 2008, we didn't know what we were facing at that time. The learnings were the only thing that we still recall. And I mean, we moved on since then, but this has nothing to do with where we were. So we can't use those learnings of today. There's a lot of that is changing. I would stick to what we initially said, is that the elements, the dimensions, the multi-dimensional facets of a brand will remain, but it will expand. So this is really, if I want to talk about it purely from the branding perspective, but there's a lot of personal learnings, there's a lot of financial learnings, there's social learnings, there is life learnings out of all of this. But on the branding front, I think we know what is the constant here and what is going to change.
Yeah, I can add in if you like. I mean, I agree. I mean, look, no one knows. I don't think anyone can say with 100% certainty what is the essential lesson. That would be presumptuous of us to claim that, so I wouldn't go that far. I do have a slightly contrarian view to what's being said often now, which is, while I agree that all of the, Zoom and working remotely and collaboration virtually, all those things will be part of our new normal. I suspect, and we can see, you can come back and we can see if I'm right. I suspect there will also be a rushing back to the pleasures of physicality and humanity and people being together. I mean, I was thinking I don't think I'll be eating lunch at my desk the first day I'm back in the office, alone. I think I'll be sitting at a table. I think there might be a lot of responses to this, a kind of renewed appreciation for what it is to be together as humans and people, and having dinner together and going into a store. I mean, I don't want to go too far with my predictions, but could this be the savior of retail? Going in and feeling the sense of the wool. What does the cotton feel like? The smells, the music. I think we might all go running out of our self isolation into the arms of each other and happily. So I don't think it's an either or, but I do think there's going to be a renewed appreciation for the physicality of the world and ourselves as humans. And I think that's something that smart brands can begin to think about: is how do they prepare for that?
Hopefully to awards dinners as well, not just restaurant lunches. That's my hope too. Maria Grazia.
Yeah, I was thinking about the same thing. I've been talking to my team, and they just look forward to go back to that old office that we were criticizing and we wanted to change. The other point for me is that culture. So a team culture, a company culture has proven to be such a strong foundation for business performance that is even more evident in this setup of remote working. So I would say, if there is one learning for me personally, I don't know if it is going to be an industry learning, is that companies will have to really think and seriously think about culture. And they will do, because they will have experienced what it means to engage people and motivate people and share a vision with the team from a remote perspective. So I'm sure that they will be much more aware of this part of their business.
Okay, well, fantastic. We've got culture, greater push for culture, for sustainability, for togetherness, and for remoteness. I think these are all things that are going to be part of the new normal. It's a real shame. We've reached the time, 20 past. It's a shame that we need to finish now. I've really enjoyed today. I'm going to ask the three of you if there is one kind of final takeout that you'd like to leave with our audience. After we've heard from them, I'm just going to go through and run through a couple of final housekeeping points in terms of all our delegates being able to access all of the notes and the slides and so on and so forth. So don't sort of disappear now. Come back for the moment. But each of you, I'd like to hear just your final thoughts in terms of your takeout for today, or something you'd like to leave with all of our delegates. And again, I think we all have you on the top left-hand side of the screen. There, Hassan, let's work our way across.
Sure. I guess the wrap of the day is what I took out of it, not just what I'm giving here, which I believe is very synonymous. In times like these, there's a lot of learnings that will come out of it, and collaborating is key. We should do this more often. I believe one of the things that will remain and is here to stay is the power of brands. We might not be in the best position today to take some crucial decisions, be it on the business management front or on the service aspect of the business. However, I believe that, like anything else, once you're in it, you're in for the long haul. So I think we will all rise, and I think we'll all come out of it. We don't know how, but we will. And I think that obviously my message to clients, to prospects, and to fellow colleagues and industry peers is that at this point in time, I think we all truly believe that there is a big opportunity to redefine what will really this new normal be, and take advantage of all those opportunities that lie out there in many industries, be it healthcare, be it the new digital players that we're seeing out there. So there is enough business to focus on. There is a lot of learnings to use and insights, and let's see where we end up with that one. Thank you so much, Andrew, again for hosting this.
Well, thank you. Thank you for part of it, and thank you for your support. Thomas?
Yeah, it's interesting for us is, I think we all know this who are part of this program today, but people often narrowly view brands as marketing communications assets or exercises, right? And I think we all know that that's true to a point, but very limited in its scope. And that brands at their best are, like we like to say at Landor, are platforms for action. They inform behavior, they inform decision making, they guide, how we respond to new conditions. And there's never been a time when that's needed more than now, right? We're all grappling with it, a very uncertain, unexpected conditions, and brand can be a guide. Brand is a rubric we can use to make decisions in times of unexpected conditions, uncertainty. And so in a sense, brand has never been more important in a way. And from that view, that way of looking at brand, I think brand has never been more important and never more helpful to help both our own agencies and our clients and others make decisions about how to best respond to this times we're in. And so I think in many ways, this is a great moment for brand when we view brand at its best, which is a decision-making tool and a guide and a platform for action for the future. And thank you, Andrew, for having me.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your contribution too. Maria Grazia.
Yes, building on Thomas' point, in the same way, all the people attending the conference today have embraced, a new experimental way of getting together and discussing topics. I think brands are in the position of looking at their core essence, defining those platforms that are going to be used as decision-making tools, and embracing the opportunities and the possibilities and experimenting with all the challenges and opportunities and new ways of working that this kind of situations is putting in front of us. So mine, I would say, is a conclusion about openness to experimentation within, your essence and your true core. So it is about embracing this in the most positive way. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Well, thanks very much, all three of you. A big thank you to Brand Lounge and to Landor. Thank you to Brand Lounge and to Landor for their support of today. It really has made a difference. Thank you very much, everyone who has attended.